And now, a conversation on unlocking Africa's human capital. Please welcome CEO of Norebase and former Assistant Chief Trade Negotiator for Nigeria, Adetola Onayemi. President and CEO, ETS, Amit Sevak. Founder and CEO of 8B Education Investments, Dr. Lydiah Kemunto Bosire. And co-founder and CEO, SeamlessHR, Dr. Emmanuel Okeleji. Moderated by Semafor's Yinka Adegoke.
We've been doing it for a number of years.
Okay. Guys, last panel of the day. This is very exciting. I really appreciate everyone being here for this. The funny thing is, it seems like it's the last panel of the day, you could take it or leave it, but this is actually kind of the most important topic. It's because it's about everyone loves to say Africa is the future, and this is one of those things people say all the time, but this is actually the panel that really talks about some of the very hard truths about what it means when you have 1 in 4 people, 4 workers by 2050 being African, 1 in 3 by what did we say it was, 2100 or 2100? By 2100. It's an important topic, and the way I want to start with it is really to think about sort of training and education, right? And we have 2 businesses here that are very much focused on how we scale education and scale training to as many young people as possible, but particularly in this context, young Africans. So I'll start with you, Lydia, just to talk a little bit about the way your company, supports or helps more people access high quality education.
Good. Well, it's a pleasure. Did you want to start with Lydia? Yeah. Okay, let's start with Lydia.
Sorry.
I wasn't quite sure.
Ladies first.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Yinka. Thank you so much, everybody, for staying around until this hour of the day. My name is Lydia. I run a company called 8B Education Investments, 8B as in short for 8 billion. As you all know, the world has entered the milestone, the population milestone of 8 billion. And it is in that milestone that Africa is a dominant player. African youth are a dominant player in that population milestone. And what we ask ourselves is, what does Africa need to be fit for purpose in a world of 8 billion? And the business that we have is financing African students to access global university. And why that matters in the context of this panel, Yinka, and in the context of the 2100, time frame when the world's population, or in fact earlier, is 25% African, is that we need African brilliance to be in all the innovation ecosystems where the future is being built. That is just one lane of how Africa contributes to that world that is coming, where the demographics of other regions of the world are such that they don't have the comparative advantage in youth as we do. And so our value prop is saying the more young Africans, and many of them can't be absorbed in our current capacities in our universities. So the more young Africans we have accessing global universities, the more Africa is contributing to the building of that future, and the more you're having entrepreneurship and other builders coming back to the continent to build the jobs that we need, that we currently are not building enough of.
Does your business ever, is there in the future of your business, is there a model where you'd consider funding people to local universities on the continent? Is that something, or do you think that focus on international universities will, create the biggest return, so to speak?
The reason why we focus on global universities, Yinka, is because we want education to be connected to outcomes in the labor market.
I see.
And so we have to keep our eyes open to 2 things. One of the places where there is an obvious connection between getting your degree and accessing the labor market is accessing a global university. But the second pathway is what COVID has forced on all of us, where Spotify is hiring Kenyan engineers. That is a pathway that is really interesting to us to the extent that it's very closely connected to the global market, the global labor market, the spaces where we know that these young people will be gainfully employed. What we are not interested in as a company is the prospect of the first-class degree-holding Kenyan engineer who is driving a bus because they do not have a job. That is not a training that we're interested in. We're interested in the training that has that connection. One of it is by physically going to a global university, and the other, there's a lot of models for that, where global education is coming to the young Africans, but there is that direct connection to the global labor market.
So I've got the funding, now I've got to do the test. Amit, and you could talk a little bit about how ETS operates, particularly in I mean, it'd be good to just sort of give people an overview of what you do, but specifically in the African context.
Sure.
What kind of numbers you're probably seeing in terms of people doing tests, and I'm interested in what.
Great. No, well, thank you so much, and it's a great honor to be here, and I'm glad we're having this session. Just on a little bit about ETS very quickly. This month marks our 75th anniversary. And so we've been around for a few decades and have been really driving, thank you, and we've been really driving the spirit of innovation in assessments. So ETS is most famous for our tests like TOEFL, which help individuals from one country go to another country by signaling their level of English language proficiency. But we do many other assessments. We do the GRE and a whole range of other assessments for higher ed. We also do assessments for K-12 education. For example, the state of California, all students in the state of California take an assessment that ETS administers to help the state get a sense of where students are in math and English proficiency for elementary, middle, and high school. We also do assessments for workers. And so some of the discussion we were just having about the opportunities to help individuals go to the next level, whether it's from an employer standpoint or for the employee, to get an assessment of their technical or their non-technical skills. So that's a little bit about ETS. We do roughly about 20 million tests every year all over Africa, Anglophone and Francophone Africa. In terms of Africa specifically, we see a ton of opportunities to use assessments. The panel is around human capital potential in Africa, and we see just tremendous opportunity, as Lydia also mentioned, around the youth population. So assessments that can help individuals that are at the age of K-12 education or in K-12 education programs, we see a huge opportunity to partner with teachers and principals and leaders of school systems to help understand where students are at. Where are they in math? Where are they in languages? Where are they in science? And so assessments, tests that can be not just your summative test, like your standard end-of-year tests or standardized tests, but even tests that are often known as formative or interim tests, like quizzes and other forms of data. We think of tests as just another way to get data about where a student is at in their journey. And the reason we are so excited about Africa is there's so much human capital potential. But the way for we as society, whether we're employers, whether we're in government, to understand where that human capital potential is to do more measurement. And this can be measurement that's sponsored by government organizations, this can be sponsored by international organizations, or by companies. But the goal is to encourage more micro-assessments so we know where students are at. That can help provide interventions in learning, that can help provide pathways to work. So for us, a test is just a moment to gather data about where an individual is.
Have you, because we all know the numbers, big population and all the rest of it, but when you've talked to, I imagine you've either pitched or just had conversations with African governments or education ministries or private companies, what kind of reception have you had? Where have you seen the most interest so far?
In terms of the continent?
Yes.
I mean, it's a great question. Many of the governments in Africa are looking at baseline data. They're looking to get a diagnostic of where students are at. Many of the countries participate in international assessment organizations like PISA, which gives a sense of where math and English levels are at that can be compared internationally. But that's just a diagnostic to compare one country versus another. then the next question is, well, what can I do to improve my score for the following year? So these kinds of diagnostic assessments are of high interest. Another one that's of high interest is test security, because many of the governments throughout Africa administer tests for entrance into public universities or exit exams to finish high school or to finish university. And those tests, how do you administer them in a secure way, given all of the hacking and other cybersecurity risks that we have internationally, not specific to Africa? So test security is another challenge. Another one is teacher development. You know, if one is interested in teaching, whether it's in biology or math, you've got a passion for biology or math, and then you go and teach. But how do you prepare a valid and fair test? That actually requires training. And so just as we think about the youth population, there's also an opportunity to train teachers on how to administer and develop fair tests. So these are some examples of the kinds of asks that we're getting: diagnostic tests, teacher training exams, and other ways to administer test security in more fair and reasonable ways.
Yes. So we've got the funding, we've done the tests, now we want to find work, and maybe technology can help. So we do have a question that I believe a video question about the use of technology. Do we still have that? Ready to go? Yep, there we do.
My name is Evelyn Lewis. I am the CEO of SBTS Group. We're a global outsourcing company who's pioneering outsourcing to Africa. I am currently in our outsourcing center in Sierra Leone, where we are training people for outsourcing jobs of different types, be it software development, be it call center related work. We are making that challenge to ourselves to pioneer this on the continent. My question is, African leaders are talking about technology is the future of outsourcing for Africa, etc. What do these leaders really know about the Location Readiness Index for us to bring outsourcing to their countries? And how much are they spending to prepare these youths for such jobs?
Okay. So I'm not going to ask you to know how much they're spending, but I do want to ask you, Emmanuel, just how technology helps people, frankly, when they get the training, get the work, right? What in your experience with your business, how's this? What are you seeing the opportunities?
Thank you for the question, and thank you very much for having me here. So a number of layers to that question. First is that it's very certain that technology is the present and the future of labor globally. And we're beginning to see that there's significant demand for tech skills in Africa. For instance, my company has maybe close to 150 engineers, and our biggest competition for talent is American and European companies trying to hire off developers and designers from Africa, paying them 5 times what we're paying them in Africa. So that's
Are they all in Nigeria or are they different countries?
So we have engineers across the continent,
okay,
but a lot of them are in Nigeria.
Okay.
And just for some context, what our company does is sort of like a work day for emerging markets, building tech for companies to manage HR, payroll, procurement, ultimately financial services as well. So sort of like an ERP that's focused on emerging markets. Yeah. And so we're seeing that, but in the last, say, 20 years, I started out in tech about 20 years ago. Despite the fact that there's more demand for engineers in Africa, there's actually more engineers in Africa now than there were 20 years ago. So we're seeing a lot of Africans get trained. There's more people who identify as all of the skills that you need in a technology company in Africa by far. So I think that there's higher demand, but there's also higher supply, and that potential continues to remain for young Africans to be trained to be very valuable in the 21st century. Like there are new 16-year-olds born every month. Millions of 16-year-olds come upstream, or 18-year-olds are ready to be employed every month across Africa. So there's significant potential and opportunity there.
Yeah, are you seeing the same thing, Tola?
Most definitely, right? I think for a bit of context, right? I think why I find this more exciting is both my previous role and now. So previously, I used to be the Assistant Chief Negotiator for Nigeria, and I basically negotiated the African Continental Free Trade Agreement. And I think one of the reasons that was incredibly important is something that I say a lot, which is that talent is distributed, but opportunity is not. And like what you're saying is, we're talking a lot about education and how you create skills for people and you test the skills. But the question is, education and capacity without a pathway to jobs, right, is basically, I would say futile. And you're seeing a lot of, and I use Nigeria as an example, you see a lot of people who have master's degrees, like almost commonplace, right? Everyone has a master's degree and they'll say, I still can't get a job, right? And I think, what I think is incredibly important, which is what my company spends a lot of time doing today, is saying, how do we create a bigger market on the continent, right? So Africa has this 1.2 billion people in a $3 trillion economy. But the question is, it's fragmented. And so the more fragmented it is, the harder it is to find jobs, the harder it is to create opportunities, right? So once you go from testing, you go to the skills, right? How do you get from that to the point where you say, these people can get jobs because it's just a bigger market, right? Because a $3 trillion market as a single market invites more capital, invites more investment, invites more business opportunities, and invariably invites more jobs. And that means more people who do train can get jobs on the continent. And so I think what we're seeing is a trend where, more than ever before, that these young people, 1.2 billion people, 70-80% of them were young, but how do they get into jobs? And I think being able to aggregate that market together, technology is one big part. You see some of the biggest jobs on the continent today are being created from technology companies, right? Technology is a big part of that. But also the question is, how do you get those people into a pathway into jobs? And I think a big part of that is aggregating the market together, creating a system. And that's what my company today does. Norebase allows you set up a company in every African market from one single website. And that means you can aggregate markets faster, you can scale faster into bigger market, create more prosperity, and just means more jobs.
Yes, that's the vision. Lydia, do you think about, I was just thinking about something Tola just said there about people getting degrees but not finding work. But do you think about that when you literally invest in someone, right, to go to college? And they come to you, I don't want to pick any particular degree, but I don't know, drama. No, so, but on a serious point, does it matter that people may or may not find work at the end of it when you back them?
It absolutely matters, because not all degrees are created equal and not all universities are created equal. And as a result of that, when underwriting lending to a student, you absolutely have to take into consideration not just their grit and their grades, but also what degree are they going to and what university and what is the likelihood, what do we know from the data and the track record of such a university to create jobs. But I also want to add something to what Tolu said around the opening of the borders, if you will. We should do absolutely all of that, and we should open Africa to the world. I think where I lose my hair is where the conversation happens as though Africa belongs in this little place and the world is over there. We have a comparative advantage in training very smart young people in a whole range of disciplines. Let's be intentional about connecting them to all the places where opportunities are, where the median age is like 20, 30 years higher than the African median age. And that intentionality, one of the first steps is, can those students be in those universities? And if not, can we create the kinds of partnerships with corporates and employers in those markets so that there is a direct relationship with the young people that we are training out of our universities? Otherwise, even if the whole continent is still is open to each other, and we're talking about this earlier, there's still 3 million jobs, there is still a demand of 12 million. We're still not meeting what we need. So we have to think about Africa as belonging in the world and African human capital as needing to be ready to execute for global demand, global jobs.
Amit, can I ask you about how technology is actually, to come back to the actual question, right, which is very specifically about how technology enables countries, particularly in Africa, obviously, because we're talking about Africa, to just, if you like, make that step, just get past some of the challenges it's had by using, I don't know, whether it's your platform, I guess, with ETS. How does that make things any quicker, cheaper, more efficient in terms of really getting more people through training?
One of the phenomenal positive kind of silver linings of the pandemic was the realization that we can use technology to deliver learning.
Right.
And it's not perfect, and there is a digital divide, right? There are folks that don't have access to that level of internet connectivity, particularly bandwidth access. But that's happening over time as more and more folks get connected to higher and higher bandwidth. We can deliver learning at a much, much more rapid rate and across borders. And so that allows us to really think differently about how do we think about training and learning. How do we think about connecting individuals from one part of the world to another to job opportunities? So from our standpoint, the way we look at it is we think about the 21st century is producing a whole new set of expectations around what skills you need, both technical skills, and that doesn't necessarily mean coding. It could be low code or no code skills,
Right.
but the ability to work in a digital context, to have digital literacy. And so digital literacy across different job types is an actual measurable set of skills. And so from our standpoint, having this digitization happening across Africa is something that's exciting for us because we see an opportunity to start to identify what skills we need to do and have to make that possible. And you can start from younger kids all the way through high school and university and beyond. So the first step is having platforms that can really deliver and scale. But we always come back, and this obviously would make sense since I'm at ETS, we want to make sure that whatever we're delivering using technology, we can measure that learning. Because one of the downsides of ed tech and technology is people think, just by using technology, I'm getting learning. How cool, how sophisticated. But the reality is, if you can't measure it, how do we know if it's really actually having learning outcomes? And that was the challenge we saw during the pandemic. A lot of people were using internet to connect to learning and teachers, but we don't really know. Actually, we do know in many cases that the learning loss was significant because there was not enough measurement, there was not enough engagement that was happening. So overall, I see the arc of technology being a positive because it's going to give more access to more opportunity to deliver that kind of learning and connectivity to work. But again, measuring that the impact of the technology on the human capital development is a huge part of this. And I go back to this concept of digital literacy. Is that K-12 student, that higher ed student, or that worker able to engage effectively using technology? And if we can measure that over time and in a systematic way, again, where African governments can play a huge role in encouraging that type of thinking, we can make a huge progress and leap forward and learn from some of the mistakes of other emerging markets.
Okay, this is great. So we're going to wrap up. So Tola has us creating a bigger market, Pan-African. MS is all about measure, measure, measure. If you can measure, you know what you're investing in, you know where it's going. Lydiah, get the right degrees, get the right education, right training. What's your vision for the workforce of the future, Emmanuel? If you were to sum it up and what you see.
Thank you. So one would imagine that because you hear that there are many young Africans who don't have a job, that all the jobs in Africa has been filled. But that's not the truth. There's still quite a lot of jobs in Africa that we can't find talent to fill.
Right. This is true.
So there's these two sides of the coin of opportunity in Africa that's very critical. It's like identifying the skills that are needed and making sure that people in Africa have the training to take on those opportunities. So we do have to create a lot more opportunities in Africa and give Africans these skills as fast as possible. So we don't have 5 years to train people to get ready. We need to be able to train people in months if we're going to fix that gap between opportunities and people. And we also need to make sure that there's mobility, ability for people to get jobs everywhere in the world, because it's not likely that Africa will be able to create all the opportunities that Africans need in 2100 or 2100.
Yeah.
That's how we run up. Opportunities on one side, we need more opportunities in Africa. We need more businesses that can employ people for a long time. Because what we have is small businesses employing people for months rather than decades. And we need more large institutions. I was saying, for instance, Amazon has 1.6 million employees. Walmart has 2.2 million employees. That's the population of Gambia. So we need more businesses that are big enough to keep people employed for a long time so that you don't have people coming out and into the labor market ever so often.
as well as people. You also mentioned mobility.
Yes, across the world. So the African talent can serve businesses globally. That's happening, but we need more.
Okay, we have to wrap it. We went over, but the conversation was worth going over. Please join me in thanking our last excellent panel. Thank you very much.